So I was just going to ask a random question, something that some of you might consider is not very relatable to the topic. Does anyone here know who Justin Timberlake is? That NSYNC guy, you know, Sexy Back, Cry Me a River. You know, when I listen to Sexy Back, I felt like the sexiest man alive, and perhaps more than the man himself. Some of you may scoff at the thought of me, this 16 years old Vietnamese boy who barely made through puberty, dares to compare himself to such an icon of the 2000s like Justin Timberlake. Yeah, I don't have six-pack. I particularly don't possess any kind of Hollywood charm the way Brad Pitt or DiCaprio has, but it doesn't matter, because I will show you how to bring sexy back for a day. I know you can cringe about it if you want to, but as confident and brazen as I'm here, I wasn't still very insecure about myself. I know it sounds very contradictory, is it, given what I just told you, but the reality is, I wasn't still questioned my own existence as a man. At times, I questioned the disparity between what I think that makes a man versus what I think that makes a man. And I was torn, because on one hand, I want to conform to fit to the status quo, but on the other hand, I want to express myself. And I need security, and the only way to achieve security is through the acceptance of others. But at the same time, I don't want to live my life like someone else's and who wants to. And that's when I realized toxic masculinity is once a never-ending journey, a never-ending battle with little or no resolution. So as some of you may have known, toxic masculinity is adherence to traditional male gender roles and characteristics that restrict the kind of allowance for men and boys to express themselves emotionally. Such characteristics are being the breadwinner of family, being sexually and physically dominant, or rarely expresses any weakness or emotional feelings. These qualities came back in a time when men literally had to die on the battlefield during many wars back in the history. However, I believe that these qualities are not a complete representation of what a man's supposed to be, and it only represents a minor fraction of what makes a man in the modern 21st century. Our society, our obsession with male pride has made men become very defensive when it comes to accept their faults or learn from their mistakes, because these traditional values, they're deeply ingrained through our society. In our society, we have taught men to become very ego-driven, that they would rather hide in disguise or die than accept their own weaknesses as a human. Why? Because this is because our father, our grandfather, our great-great-grandfathers, passed from generation and generation, have taught us that we must demonstrate a good examples for younger boys around us so that they can become the very same, emotionally brought up creature and egocentric. Now, I believe that those who practice toxic masculinity are those that harm by the most. Now, to all the guys here, have you ever heard the phrase, big boys don't cry? Well, I bet your parents have told you at least once, or twice, or thrice, when you're about to cry or to have a breakdown. And as you can see, from a very young age, we're taught to suppress our own vulnerable feelings and swallow it up so that we don't bring any shame to our family. Why? Why is it a norm? Because our society, we legitimize male dominance. It's natural for us to see men compete and dominate in whatever field they don't participate in. And also, why? Because we don't want a weak person to compete with us. We don't want a weak person to dominate, and who wants to? Who thinks that's even possible? And every day, we carry a facade that shows us with pride and dignity, but deep inside, our heart is bruised with all the pains and sufferings that we'd rather not show it to anyone except ourselves. And by the time things get serious and we have reached at the end of the road, then we start to seek for a coping mechanism for us to deal with all the struggles by ourselves, like the use of substance, for instance. Now, as men, we're in fear of being mocked for expressing struggles. We're fear for being mocked for expressing weakness. Because since we're little, we're taught to hold everything inside, because that's what men's supposed to do. That's why men are unable to correctly express how they feel. That's why men are unable to communicate their own thoughts and problems with other people and unable to seek for help, because they fear of being belittled by others, where it's their family or where it's their relatives. And often they're intentionally worsen the issues by relying on substance and other unhealthy practices like self-harm, for instance. And these often lead to depression with alarming records of an increase in suicide cases among men. In the US alone, men are 3.53 times more likely to commit suicide compared to women in 2016. But that's not the end yet. Toxic masculinity insists that men must exist within the predetermined set of characteristics and will react viscerally to anyone that's willing to challenge it. Now, I ask you a simple question. How do we make sure that man is the most dominant creature in our society? Well, simple. We strip the same rights that we enjoy for ourselves from women, who are now reduced to merely sexual objects, and dehumanize them by branding them with undesired characteristics according to our standards. How do we handle gay people who are considered to be out of status quo, out of rigid expectations of the binary of gender? We demonize them. We say to them, God brought HIV/AIDS to kill them, and they're just spawn of devils that don't deserve a chance to live on this earth. And how do we make sure that men don't show any weaknesses? Well, we normalize violence against men and criticize any person who dares to show any weaknesses. Boys will be boys. That's what the mother said to her son when he came back home from school, crying miserably for being bullied. And we fetishize military as a symbol of masculinity. And we take pride in military parade without aware of these veterans. They suffered horribly from PTSD as a result of deadly wars. And as all you can see here, all the biggest social issues right now, from homophobia to misogyny to depression, it all stems from toxic masculinity. And to quote from my favorite entertainer, the legendary artist and philanthropist Madonna, she once said, "In life, there's no real safety except for self-belief." And at the end for me, following my heart and following my passion is all that matters. So I refuse to abide to the standards that people put up on me or other men, and willing to explore new things, explore new ventures that are considered to be unconventional for other guys. And that's when people start to bother. Those detractors, they're relentless to question my belief. They're relentless to question my identity because they have not seen any real men that are interested in any feminine hobbies like art and fashion that are considered for gay men and women who are often being treated as second-class citizens according to their social hierarchy. And some of them are so ignorant that they believe that as men, we have to be dominant in a relationship with women, or else we're not real men. How ignorant are they? And that's when people start to shove things into my face in hope of changing me and fixing me, bringing back into a stereotypical male model. Now, have you ever heard of this phrase? I bet it sounds familiar. Man up. Suck it up. Don't be a pussy. And some of us even being labeled as gay or being sissy because we're interested in feminine hobbies, feminine interests are constantly unconventional. That's when I realized that these derogatory labels, these derogatory language are served for us as a reminder of what is the definition of being a real man. And that I learned over time, that a man is a creature that with machismo, charisma, and power. And that as men, there's no room for crying. There's no room for showing weakness because we have to shove all the pain and insecurity aside to stand tall and proud the ladies. What I had to go through is a product of society that put us in frames like gingerbread cookies. We are taught with this narrative, men are strong, women are weak. What an outdated narrative. And at times I ask, if men are truly confident enough and secure enough about themselves, why do we have to drag women down? Why do we have to fear a difference or to drag people down, uplift ourselves, and assert our dominance? Why? I cannot fathom such reality as I need to do something about it. But complaining is not going to change anything, as you all know. So I use art as a platform to express my own discontent. Because I believe in art, there's no boundaries on gender, on politics, on sexuality. And I was inspired by the spirit of these legendary artists in the 80s like Basquiat, Keith Haring, Andy Warhol, because they're willing to say what they want and do what they feel, and they know exactly who they are. They're not afraid. So I think so I use art in this case to say fuck you to those distractors who are stuck up with an ignorance point of view. But saying the F word is not enough. But it's about looking things in a deeper meaning, looking at a bigger perspective, that there's more than one rigid framework of being a man. My friend Anna, she has taught me those valuable things. But the most valuable thing for me is that there's so much opportunities out there. and it's not limited to our stereotypical male expectations. I learned to become a more compassionate human being, to be kind and to treat others with dignity and respect. I learned that sometimes I need to be more sensitive or to deal with others' feelings. And sometimes it's not necessarily to win all the fights physically with other men, but it's about being a good human. It's about having morals, knowing who you are, and treat others with dignity and respect. And that's how you stand tall and proud for the ladies, not using physical violence. So you question me how I'm bringing sexy back? Simple. I choose to reject the version of the crafted version of beauty and craft out my own. And as long as living the happiest life and be willing to express myself, then I am the sexiest man alive, and no one's going to stop me from doing that. Thank you.